So I'm Norm. I'm the founder of Multi-Shelter Solutions. I'm the creative force behind the product. Andy is the creative force behind all the things that you see, website and social media type stuff. And one of the things that we are really missing, especially I'm really missing this year, is the opportunity for trade shows. I've always very much enjoyed the opportunity of meeting people, talking to them about their concerns, sort of especially in the environment of like the outdoor shows where we have a shelter or two standing, so there's something concrete to refer to. Like, even though somebody might be doing something totally different, they can still, we'll just say, well, okay, so yours is a little different this way, or you're doing better that way type of thing. So we're looking at this avenue as an alternative of meeting some of the people and interacting. And this is the first one that we're doing, and we're excited about the opportunity. We're excited about the questions that we have been getting already, so that we have something to address specific, rather than just something that I've probably said 100, 200, 500 times already. So I would like to start with thanking Nathan for submitting a question. And Nathan is from Maple Grove Nursery in Bridgetown, Nova Scotia. And this is a question regarding, it's a construction related question. It says, my question is, where is the end plastic attached to the end hoop? Is it the same Wirelock channel that I use for the top cover? And if so, how do I go about attaching the bottom end wall plastic section where the roll-up sides are located? So, and before I start answering that, and again, because this is going to be, this is recorded, I want to just remind everyone that this is a venue for exchanging information, not talking about something specific on your building, a specific problem or whatever. Like, we're going to keep it general so that it's for the benefit of everyone. The same thing goes, well, what's the price on this or what's the price on that? You would need to call the office to get that, rather than taking up the space here. So getting to Nathan, the answer to Nathan's question. When you're building the structure, it is important that once the whole frame is standing and you have the top of the roll-up in place, like, you need to do that before you really start working with any of the cover products. And that is both for the ends and for the roof. You need to have the framework done first. One of the things that you really need to do too is, for this top of the roll-up, make sure that where that intersects the gable end, that is pushed in, so it just butts in. You don't want to have that bump on the end, because that's going to cause problems later on. So once that is done, you're going to be doing the framing of the end first. Now, there are situations where, let's say you're getting into the fall, there's very few good plastic days left. You might want to put the roof on before you do the ends, but generally speaking, it's better to do the ends first. So when you have the framing done, you have your doors placed, any window openings framed in, all of that framing is done. You take the rectangular piece of plastic that you're getting for each end. You fasten it at the two bottom corners so that you have something resistance when you're pulling the plastic up to the top, because you will be starting to fasten at the top. And the Wirelock channel that is part of the package, which goes up and over both ends, is used for both the end covering and the roof covering. So because it's a rectangle that you're covering, you'll have extra that goes around the edges. So what you can do is take that and fasten it to the back side of your posts so that it temporarily holds it there. Once the front is wrinkle free, and you can just adjust it this way or adjust it, whichever way to get the wrinkles out, then you can also put some vertical strapping on the outside face of the framing just to hold it in that place. You can put a couple of pieces of the wire insert into the track just to hold it again tight, because what you're going to be doing is once that is all complete, now you're ready to put the roof on. One of the things to remember when you've got one end closed, and especially if it's better to have any openings cut in there, it just decreases the wind resistance. So now it's tucked over, and you're going to do the same thing on both ends. You're going to fasten it all in place. And one of the things that little tricks that I've done quite a few times is when I take the end plastic and I lay it out away from the building, and then I stand on the inside of the building and fasten the bottom edge of the cover to the horizontal on either side of the door, or if it's going all the way across, fastening it all the way there. The benefit of doing that, now when you go to pull the plastic up to the top, that wood strapping is on the inside of the plastic, which means it's no longer exposed to the weather. So now when you have that plastic up and it's tacked in place, now you're ready to do the roof. And so you're going to, if you've got a single layer or a double layer, you're going to roll out the plastic and you're going to pull it over. It's important that you have a ladder against each end so that you're pulling up to the top before you throw the rope down and start pulling the other way. That way, it's not as hard on the plastic, because if you just throw the rope over and start pulling from the ground, trying to get it over the crest is going to be really hard on it. So all you need to do is just pull the two corners over, and then you can start pulling, because the rest will follow. Once you have the roof plastic centered, then, and this is actually a trick that I've done quite often, is when the plastic is laying on the ground and you have an open, clean area where you can do this, if you stretch out the plastic and you take a minute to just mark where the center is, now when you're pulling it over, you don't have to, because it's irregular and not very straight and whatever at first, if you have a little mark there, you know, okay, this is the center. So when I pull it over and now you take that extra little wire insert out and then put it back on just to hold it. Now you know that you've approximately have it in the right spot. You can go to the other end and again, pull it straight. You're going for that little mark. So now your plastic is centered and straight. The critical thing is that you pull it lengthwise tight first. So what you're going to wind up having is one person stands on the inside of the structure, pulling on the end plastic, so it goes over the arch. One person pulls on it, and then another person is pulling on the roof when another person puts the insert in. Like, as you get more experienced, one hand can do one job and one hand can do the other job. But when you're new at this, it's probably best to do that idea with 3 people. So you're going to get the one end tacked, you go to the other end, and you pull it tight lengthwise. And so now you can work from the center down. And once it's tight lengthwise, now what you're going to do is go halfway down on both sides and fasten it at the top of the roll up, or at the bottom if you don't have roll up. The same concept works if there's no roll up, or if it's a tarp cover, you're fastening at the middle on both sides. What happens then is, because you've probably picked perfect weather to do this, and the weather doesn't stay perfect for very long. So once you have the peak at both ends fastened and halfway down on both sides, you've actually divided the job into 4 equal quarters. And so now when the wind starts coming, whichever way the wind starts coming, that's the direction you work. You work into the wind. And you work from the middle of the side to the corner. You work from the peak down to the corner. And if there are any wrinkles in there, you're always pulling 90 degrees to the wrinkle. So if the wrinkle is up and down along the arch, you're pulling it lengthwise. If it's horizontally, you're pulling it down. In most cases, the wrinkle will be diagonal, which means that you're working it down towards the corner. Now, it's actually easier to do a long structure, even though that's a bigger piece of plastic. It has a tendency to more just lay straight when you've got a bigger piece of plastic. I know that for most people that have never done this before are grateful if their building is small, because it's just a smaller piece of plastic and they're doing it quicker. The one thing that I do suggest is, if you can, and again, if you've never done this before, the quicker you can get those 4 points of contact done, the better. So if you can round up a couple of extra people to get that in place, your extra help can then go, because if the wind starts picking up, once you've got those 4 tack points done, the consequences are very minimal. It's never a case where the wind will go from 0 to 60 in a matter of minutes. Like, that doesn't happen. It'll quickly start getting windier. Obviously, if the weather forecast calls for a storm in the afternoon, you're not going to do it until the next day. Again, if you're inexperienced. If you're experienced and you will comfortably get it done in an hour, well, then the weather's perfect, go for it. The only additional comment yet is, if you are dealing with a double layer of plastic, what you're going to be doing is you roll both pieces out along the side. And again, if you have a chance to mark them, then that's great. When the first one is in place and it's tacked lengthwise and at the four corners, now you can start pulling the second one over. The reason for doing it that way is, so now when you pull the second one over, you're not pulling the first one off, or you're not pulling it off of center. And any of the wire inserts that you're putting in, you only need to put like a foot or so of the insert in. That will more than hold it while you're doing the work. And you don't want to go and put the whole insert in, because it just means that you're then having to take the whole insert to, again, put it on top, because the wire insert will hold the roof plastic, the double layer of roof plastic, and the end plastic. One other little detail to...
I'm sorry to do this to you. I've got a delivery of gravel come right now. I'm very sorry.
One last little tidbit. When somebody's pulling on the plastic, always make sure that they're pulling at least a foot ahead of where the wire insert is going, because if you're pulling at the same spot where the wire goes in, you're going to damage the plastic.
I will be back, but yeah, I'll just pop. Sorry about this, guys.
That's okay.
Not a problem. Thank you for your question, and thank you for joining us.
Well, and I just wanted to reiterate about Nathan's question about the where the end plastic is attached to the end hoop, and is it the same Wirelock channel for the top cover. What did you address that?
Yeah, it is the same channel. That channel is capable of holding the single layer of end plastic going in one direction and the roof plastic even as a double layer going the other way. That channel sits on the top side of both sets of end hoops. One thing for our listeners to remember as well, when you're installing that Wirelock channel, you start at the bottom and you work your way up. When you get to the top, just lean on the channel. It will bend without kinking, and then you can continue down the other way. And that way there's not a rough edge that could potentially catch on the cover.
When did you have any specific tips about how to get all three covers in the Wirelock channel without undoing the whole situation?
Okay, so this is where the benefit of, like, especially for someone who has not done this before, the benefit of having three people to do this, so that one person will be handling on the inside of the structure, which is the end cover, just going over the hoop, and then another person pulling on the roof cover. Now, the tricky part is just the first couple of inches of the insert going in, because once you've got like just a short piece of that insert in, now the person can work ahead of the person who's putting the insert in. And so, and as I just mentioned, it is important for those people that are the ones that are pulling on the cover to be ahead of the where the insert is going, because you don't want to be forcing the insert in with the plastic being pulled at the same time, because that will do damage.
Well, and I had shared with Nathan last night, and I also shared in the chat, and I'll put it in the comments of the recording as well. We have a YouTube video about installing multiple covers into one Wirelock channel as well. And so I will share the link when I post the recording and whatever to that as well, just to help give people a little bit of additional information about that concept as well. Because I know that's one that people tend to get a little bit more confused about. And so it's good to have as many resources as you can for that kind of thing. So
yeah, the big advantage of the actual video that I made of putting the cover on is, even though it's a very little small tabletop model of a greenhouse, there's something concrete to refer to. And for a lot of people, that is just an easier way to understand, how things go when there's a visual thing to reference.
right, yeah. So, well, that was a great question from Nathan, and we look forward to having more questions sent in and everything as well. You can either message on social media or you can email it in, and we can focus on that for some of the future ones as well. And it's, we love to be able to address the common questions that people are having, and then people can reference, and the tips that you shared for putting on the cover will help so many people for their project and everything. So it's great information that you shared.
I've had similar conversations with people before, because a lot of people are very intimidated by putting the cover on. That is a big piece of plastic. It isn't particularly sturdy if it's just flapping in the wind, and it's an intimidating thing. And I generally get the feeling when I talk to people, and I hope that people will get that feeling from listening to this as well. and it just instills a little bit of confidence. It's not nearly as intimidating an undertaking as they might think. Like, obviously, the key part to success is just in being prepared. And that's why in our installation booklet as well, we've got an extensive list of things to do to be prepared, because you've got the perfect weather, you're going for it, and then all of a sudden, well, you've forgotten this or you've forgotten that. So like, that's the kind of thing that we want to help people avoid, so that the the chances of them having a perfect cover installation is greatly increased. One of the little things I've sort of in tongue in cheek said to many people is that, especially when people have a double layer with the inflator, that little inflator fan has an amazing way of making amateur installers look professional, because if there's a few little wrinkles in the plastic and then you get it all puffed up, everything is nice and tight and wrinkle free and it looks, perfect. One of the big advantages of that airspace there, it sort of acts like a shock absorber. And that's why, especially, we talk to a lot of people from the East Coast, where almost the very first thing they always say is, it's really windy. That air pocket acts as a shock absorber, and it's amazing how much more rigidity that gives to the building in super windy locations. And so, the number one reason for that double with the air in between is for better heat efficiency. But the other thing is that it does add to the life of the plastic, and it acts as a shock absorber in super windy locations.
Well, and we have an article on our website too that says, you're in a windy location, we can help. We ended up covering a couple more points to your question, Nathan, while you were gone. So don't worry, that will be in the recording and everything too, that you can rewatch and study things down. But that also leads us into the other question about growing over the winter time, and you were talking about the double layer having the heat efficiency, and that is one of the keys to being able to grow over winter in a greenhouse as well. And with everybody looking this year particularly to be more self-sufficient and have more food security and growing their own food, we do have a surprise that we're working on around that we're going to announce in the coming weeks and whatever. But right now, we did have a bunch of people asking if it's possible to keep growing food over winter, so that they would be able to be prepared and have that option. And so Norm put together an article that's going to be posted on our website during Organic Week, which is next week, I believe, or the week after. And but he was going to touch on a couple of those things now, because we have been getting those questions about how do we grow over winter in a greenhouse. And so did you want to answer that and address that, Norm?
Yeah, people will look at plastic and they don't see much value in keeping heat in with just a layer of plastic, and that's true. And so that's why, how can you in a realistic way grow over winter? And the simplest way to make a greenhouse more heat efficient is to put the second layer of plastic on with air in between. Now the key to that working to the expectation, to the requirement, is to create dead air space. The closer you get to dead air space, the more efficient that it's going to be. you can take a double thermal window, and that is vacuum sealed. So that means that that airspace doesn't move at all. And that's why for a clear window, that can be as heat efficient as it is. You can't duplicate something exactly like that for on a greenhouse, not for a realistic cost anyway. So when you're putting this extra layer of plastic on, the ideal is 10 to 15 centimeters of airspace. Now, the problem with that is because the plastic is fastened around the edges and at both ends. So obviously, with it being fastened into the same track, into the same mechanism, it's pinched off, so you're going to get less airspace there. Now, but that doesn't mean that the idea, you still don't just strive for the ideal. The recognition is that you're not going to get it perfectly unless you really put a lot of extra effort into how you're going to do it, fasten it along the edge so that you have a consistent airspace all the way across. And again, because it's a moving surface, you won't necessarily get it anyway. One of the things that you need to be sort of vigilant about is, even though plastic is extremely strong, there are certain things that can puncture it. You know, you certainly don't want to have cats in the neighborhood climbing over it and things like that, or birds landing on it, because the claws will make little holes. And what happens is, if it's just small holes, you're going to get a little bit of air coming out, and the inflator is going to keep it puffed up, but you're going to be getting a transfer of heat, because if you're losing something, then you're getting a transfer of heat. So you are going to have to watch that there aren't any holes in it. And the easiest way to check for that is just put your finger against it when it's new, and just do that every day so that you have an idea of, okay, what does a fully inflated feel like? You have a reference point. So now if you just periodically check and all of a sudden it's inflated but it feels soft, you know you need to check for to make sure that there isn't a hole in it. Another way of making a structure more efficient, heat efficient, is insulating the end walls. Now, one of the things that you have to watch for when you're doing that, if you have a south-facing wall, which is in the wintertime, that's where the light comes from, that's where the warmth comes from. So you want to make sure that you don't have that insulated, as in solid board creating a shadow, because that's also, you know, light is a precious commodity in the wintertime. And if you start putting up something that is going to cause shade, not only are you cutting down on, well, you are making it more heat efficient, but you're also cutting down on the light that is available, and you're going to get a reduction in the crop. So there is not a benefit in that way. If it's a north-facing wall, on the other hand, you know, certainly go for it. Like if you're in an area where the north wind is the prevailing winter wind, it's a critical thing to insulate that wall. For the south-facing side, one of the things that you can do if you want to insulate it is to just take a second layer of plastic and put it on the inside of the framing. So just like on the roof, you're putting a double layer with air in between. When you have plastic on the outside of the framing, which is the normal way of closing it, if you put plastic on the inside of the framing, you don't have to inflate it, because it's already inflated simply by the framing holding that airspace. It doesn't have to be pressurized to be effective. So that way you can get the heat efficiency. one thing that I just realized is the third part of Nathan's question, which I forgot to answer, but I can tie into now making the greenhouse more heat efficient at the same time. The question was regarding the wire lock at the bottom, like when you've got roll up sides. And if you have a spot where you can just tuck that plastic around and hold it there, because the insert is going to come out when you're rolling this up and down. Now, when you're closing it for the winter time, then what you're going to do is put the insert in the same as you did for all the rest. So now the ends are closed, and whatever you're using for the top, at the top of the roll-up, whether that is wood strapping or wire lock, you can remove a small piece so that the air will escape from the top into the bottom. That way you're avoiding having to create jumpers and this kind of thing. See, because for making the structure more heat efficient for the winter time, you would like to have air in the roll-up side as well. And again, it pinches off at the top of the roll-up, and then it puffs up again. So you're going to have a little bit of discrepancy there, but for the most part, like by having some air in the pocket at the bottom, you're going to get heat efficiency there. You're going to have heat efficiency at the top as well. But for that to work, you do need to have the wire inserts all the way down to the bottom. And it is important to get it all the way to the bottom, because you don't want a little, again, like anytime you have cracks anywhere, that will allow some air to escape. And anytime there is a place for air to escape, you're going to be minimizing the full benefit of having heat efficiency. Double plastic with air in between, done properly, will reduce your heat loss by 30%. So it is a significant number. It is worth the extra effort to get it right, because I've done some calculations in the past and found that even heating for 6 weeks in the springtime, so we're not even talking going through the winter, like heating 6 weeks in the springtime will cost you enough extra on heating that it's going to pay having the double put on properly. So it is an important thing to do. Now, if you're going to be growing through the winter time, the first bit of advice I always say to people is make sure your expectations are realistic. Because if you're looking at spending only $100 a month on heating, that's your budget, and you're wanting to grow cucumbers or tomatoes, which is a high heat requirement, it's going to cost you a lot more. Now, what you have to weigh is, okay, how much is it going to cost me to heat? How much am I going to get? How much extra are people willing to pay for fresh local tomatoes in the middle of the winter? Maybe they're willing to pay enough that will justify the heat. In most cases, that's not realistic. What people will do is they'll just identify cold weather crops, things that don't need a lot of heat, and plant those, and they'll be planting them in the ground. Like you definitely want to be planting things in the ground, because you can develop a heat sink in the ground, so you're not heating as high. Now, one of the things for determining how much heat you require is how much surface area do you have. And when I'm doing a little bit of a rough calculation, and I'm not a heating engineer, but I do have some experience with it, is you measure the distance over the top to get your total coverage area, which is the area that can be radiating heat. If you can reduce that, that means that you're going to need less heat. And that's why what some people will do is with the light poly pipe, PVC pipe, they'll make small little hoops to cover their beds, and then they can just drape a piece of plastic over that for the nighttime. And because even a few light bulbs underneath there is going to make a difference, whereas like light bulbs in a greenhouse is not going to make any difference at all. But what you need to really be aware of is, and especially since most people use a piece of old plastic for their little tunnels, it's not particularly clean, which means that, and that's not a problem for at night when it's dark anyway, but if you need to remove that during the daytime so that you get the extra light, because like now 3 layers of plastic, you are starting to diminish the light that is available to the plants. And so things are going to be reduced. The growth is going to be reduced. The general rule of thumb has always been 1% less light is 1% less crop. Now, so it's a given that in the winter you've got less light already. So you're going to get less crop. Things are just going to grow slower. You've got less heat units as well. So you don't want to go and make this worse by just having it always covered with dirty plastic or whatever. Your heating bill might be very, very low, but you're not going to get much return as well.
I just want to be aware of the time, Norm, that we do have to wrap up in about 5 or 10 minutes. We need to wrap things up. So I just wanted to remind, be the timekeeper.
Yeah, so making a greenhouse more heat efficient is something that I can talk for a long, long time about. There's a lot of little tricks to it, but I think what I've done here is enabled people to start thinking in that direction. We are going to be putting together a little package, as Andy alluded to, a little surprise thing. So there's going to be more information about this, but I would like to thank everyone who has tuned in both in person and who has taken the time to watch this. And I am looking forward to interacting with you all on a regular basis again.
Did we cover everything that you needed, Nathan, from what you can?
Beautiful, thank you. I'm sorry I had to go in that little.
Oh, no worries, no worries. We're grateful that you were able to join us and be part of our inaugural session. So.
Thank you, Norm, and thank you, Andy. Appreciate that very much.
Yeah. Well, and thank you, everybody, and stay tuned for next week when we come again with some more questions and information. So thank you so much for joining us.